Good evening, and welcome to Conversations with Your Inner Child. I'm very happy that you are here live, or if you're watching the recording. Waiting for my co-host, Oliver J.R. Cooper, to join the screen. It should be happening round about now. And here we are.
I'm there a bit late on the call here, but I've made it.
This is record time.
Against the odds.
This is amazing. Wonderful. Great to see you here, Oliver.
Great to be here again, Errol, and to finally get down to the second part of this call, because I very much enjoyed the first.
Absolutely. Me too, likewise. It was a great response. A lot of people really enjoyed, got a lot of benefit out of our first live stream, and here we are in the part 2, episode 2 of Conversations with Inner Child. So just for those that go on.
No, I just said that we knew that we had to change the name of the call to make it a bit more inclusive in a sense, because the other was a bit more specific.
Yes, it was. So we just expanded it out there. And for those that are joining that haven't sort of either met me or Oliver, I'd just like to hand the stage over to Oliver, just for Oliver to share a little bit about himself, so that you can get to know him.
Hand over the screen. So I have written just over 1,700 articles now. I have 16 books out, and these are mainly to do with self-help and emotional healing and dealing with the effects and the cause of trauma. And I've also done a number of videos too, and a podcast. And I've been doing this kind of stuff now for about 7 years with the writing, and a bit longer in general. And just from the beginning, I didn't plan to be an author or to write articles. It's just something that just seemed to happen. So it was all a big surprise.
Beautiful. And these articles and the books, they're available on, is it Amazon?
Yeah, they're all on Amazon and on Kindle too. And I've even got an audiobook coming as well, which is about the inner child. So that would be a first edition for an audiobook from me.
Wonderful. A lot of time, effort, energy, and passion put into those articles and those books, I'm sure.
Yeah, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, as they say. So, and how about you, Errol? For the people that are not aware of your background, it'd be good for me and them to hear more about.
Well, I've been in the personal development field for what seems like forever. It's been an amazing field or realm to be in and to play in. Going through learning many different modalities and healing systems over the years, from the mainstream hypnotherapy and counseling and coaching and NLP, to the not so mainstream sort of energy healing, dealing with sort of inner realms, outer realms, realms within realms, from shamanic to the sort of spirit realms and energy healing. So all in all, more than 40 different modalities later, after I learned more than 40, I created my own system of healing. During this time, I've opened up a healing school. I have an online academy, and basically I travel around the world, living in beautiful places. Actually, very, very blessed to be always living in beautiful places, and doing what I love the most. which is holding space for people to grow, holding space for people to remember who they are, remember their authentic self, their true self. So this is what I love doing, and I continue to do this. And I'm now expanding what I do into sort of live stream now, expanding into the video, so I can sort of reach more people, even more people. So that's a little bit about me. Just
So with you said about the because I understand now you got the diploma and then you've got some number of different online courses. How do people find the website for that?
On my website, on my errolcampbell.com website, there's on the menu bar, there's the Academy. So people click onto the Academy, they can find out a little bit more about the online diploma that I'm offering there. And it's sort of a culmination of all the work that I've done. And part of that work, part of the Academy is a focus on the inner child, which is what we're going to be focusing on this evening. It's one of the areas that I really love. It's incorporated into my online academy because I feel it's so important. It's such an important area. It's the area of the wound, the area of that sort of that shadow part of the self, the suppressed part of us, the unexpressed or unloved or unheard part. And so it's part of the. It makes up one of the modules, one of the 14 modules of my academy, my diploma course, and and here we are this evening, to both hold space and
ready to go again,
and dive in again with the questions that are hot on people's minds, and people wanting to sort of understand a little bit more on to do setbacks and how we keep going through rough times, and obviously how is this linked into the inner child. So the setbacks people are talking about in terms of the barriers or the blocks that are holding us back from going forward, and moving forward. What would you say, Oliver, in terms of sort of in relation to the inner child, how we deal with setbacks, how we keep going in rough times? What would you say in terms of the link to the inner child?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, because I remember when it came to setting, it seems like it's unrelated. But I would say in terms of the inner child, because there's going to be the moments when it seems as though nothing is happening, and we can get through identifying completely with that part of us that is in pain. It can then stop us from being able to keep going. We can think, is this worth it? Or to completely identifying with that part of us, then we can get sucked in and completely weighed down. And what I'm reminded, many years ago, I think it was perhaps when I first started to do this kind of work, was that I often had moments where I felt completely hopeless and powerless and even suicidal. And during those moments, I just used to, it would get me down. And then I got to the point where I said to myself, I'm here, I'm alive, and I can't give up. It's not possible. So I'm here, I've got to keep going. And then there's no option. And I think one of the reasons why I came to that conclusion was that I looked back on how far I'd come, and even though it seemed as though I hadn't really made a lot of progress compared with what was in my head about where I should be and how the people around me were. But when I looked back on how far I'd come, even though it was insignificant, or it seemed I'd actually come a long way. And I think the big key is to not compare ourselves with what other people are doing or where we should be, but to look back on our own timeline and to see, where did I begin?
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. and it's beautiful that you shared, the dark times that you've experienced as well. The that aspect of comparison, and moreover that need to prove, and something from my own journey. I remember in certain parts of my career, that desire to prove. It really did. I mean, it did benefit because it gave me this fuel. It gave me the fire to keep going and really succeed and do as good as I possibly can. And at the same time, it can act as something that can sabotage. It can act as something that can sort of set you back. Purely because it's as well as being a driving force, that proving energy. It can also destroy you as well. It can also sort of be so all-encompassing that you go into burnout, and also you could very easily step on people's toes, because so much is focused on this proving, and it could be that you do anything just to get that thing done, or to get to that position, or to get that, to accomplish what it is that you need to accomplish. And I have that experience in the past of that proving energy. And I've worked with a lot of clients with this as well, where we find out that the driving force behind someone's actions or desire in their career is, on one hand, a real passion and desire to help people or whatever it is that they're doing. And on the other hand, there's this polluted fuel that's inside that focus as well. And that pollution is their proving energy. Their desire to prove, their desire to really achieve, because they need the recognition, and the recognition is coming from a place of not feeling recognized, not feeling that they're adequate, not feeling good enough. And what happens when you've got this fuel, when it's inside a passion and a focus to get something done, is 9 times out of 10 always going to loop the person back to feeling inadequate and not good enough, and that they need recognition. So this then causes a setback. So it's their own loop back. Because of this fuel is in there, it loops back into them ending up feeling the same thing that they don't want to feel, which is the lack of recognition and the feeling that they're not good enough. And this can create setbacks. So even though this fuel of proving can be something great and can really drive you forward, it's inevitable that it will loop back and create a setback, because the nature of the wound is for the person to learn through the wound. And if that wound is, I'm not good enough and I'm not recognized, it's going to loop the person back in, because they're not learning. They're not learning from it. Instead, they're putting 28 hours a day in order to accomplish the very thing that they feel inadequate about, and suddenly at some point they'll loop back in. So so even the driving force of proving energy can loop back into creating a setback for somebody. And I personally experienced elements of that myself, and I've
me too. Yeah, as you say, the more it's like the desire, isn't it? The more we want something, that push it away, and as you said, the energy of needing and wanting to prove something, can be very powerful, and that can then push us forward. But it can then make it very hard for us to be content to actually live in the moment, because there's always something out there, something more that we can do, and then we'll be whole and complete. So it's like a battle that can never be won, like a hole that can never be filled.
There's always that next thing that you need to do, that other thing that can be the thing that's going to do it. There's always it just keeps going. And there's that, like you said, there's never that moment of feeling fulfilled in the now for what you've actually achieved, because the energy within is that you're not successful, or you're not, or you're a failure, or you haven't reached that imaginary bar that's in your mind that you've set for yourself. And so there's always going to be something else to do in order to reach that bar, but it's never ending. So when people don't measure, they don't measure their steps or their goals. You know, if they don't put it into small measured steps, and at each step that there's a point where they celebrate because they have accomplished something. Here's an accomplishment. Here's that step that's been reached.
Yeah.
When these things aren't in place, it's just like one continuous uphill battle to get to where they want to go. This could be for, in relationships. This could be, in career. It could be in finance. It could be anything. And so this can create setbacks. When there's no acknowledgement of the success that they actually are. And this can be linked directly back into childhood when the child doesn't feel that they have the acknowledgement, that they're doing well. They're not getting feedback. They're not getting the feedback. They're not understanding when they're doing well. So they're going to continue without knowing when to stop, because they've never had that pat on the back, or they've never had that acknowledgement from the parents. Say, oh, well done, this is great, look at all the time you put and the effort you put into that. Isn't that amazing? You now deserve this, or now you should have a break, or now. And in the absence of that, it's just keep going, and that could create a foundation for not living in the now.
Yeah, I suppose in a way it's a bit like when a child is not really allowed to develop boundaries, so they're not given the limits. And there's slightly different context here, but the same. If a child doesn't get the limits, they don't know where they are, where they're not. They don't know what's acceptable and what isn't. And as you said, when there isn't the small feedback, so as you've done well, or the child might have only, when they were a child, they might have only have received feedback if they achieve something really big. So you get A stars, or you get something like that, or you come first in the race, or all these really big things. It has to be something big. If it's not, then it's overlooked. Yeah. And then, as you're saying, it then becomes a pattern as an adult to be something big, something more, the next thing.
Absolutely. And this goes on to the next question is like, how do you stop being hard on yourself? How do you stop being hard on yourself? How do you stop the self-sabotage? And it ties right into that very thing of proving, or not knowing when there's that feedback, or that you've done good, or that sort of acknowledgement. And this is like a result of that childhood wound can end up turning into behavior where the person is then hard on themselves. Ultimately, they can then be hard on others as well, because they're hard on themselves. And that's perhaps learned behavior of their parents being hard on them. And here it is, they're hard on themselves, now they're going to be hard on others, and it's just sort of spreading like a virus here. The being hard on self, which is also sort of creating self-sabotage there, because it's stopping that flow.
Yeah, this is it, isn't it? The external messages become the internal messages, and instead of the parent being the one, it's us doing it to ourselves. So, as you're saying, once we can recognize the small things, what is going well and not what isn't going well, and I've only done this, I haven't done that, then it's kind of like closing the gap, changing our focus, and then we can be a lot softer on us, and to be the parent that we didn't have, to be loving and supportive to ourselves, because we're not. And I think this is where things like meditation come in, through being able to observe those parts of ourselves and not to get caught up, because I think this is a big problem. I realized myself, I thought about recently, is that to identify in what's going on, and then it's the creating a mountain out of a molehill, scenario where everything just becomes huge, and it could just, It's like watering the weeds, they become. So I'd say it comes down to the self-talk and a change of focus.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that focus is ultimately is so important, because if the focus isn't on the now, if the focus is not on I am already good enough, everything I'm accomplishing right now is good enough, everything that I do is good enough, that's the person being in a now. That is the person being in a now. And focusing on I haven't done this, or I need to be doing this, is when that I'm being hard on myself behavior really can kick in. It can cause stress. It's going to cause relationship problems, financial problems, many different problems, even in the workplace. And this is all linked back. This can all be linked back into, experiences in the child, in that sort of inner child arena, where that wound is there, where they suddenly receive information that makes them think that they just need to keep doing something, and suddenly it just turns into a pattern, and it creates this structure in the mind and the feelings, and then suddenly the actions are following, and boom, here they are, they're setting themselves up for life to just keep, it's like they're in like one gear forward non-stop, got to keep going, got to keep doing, and there's not enough being happening in that. It's just doing. And it's great on one hand to do. We do need to have action to do things and accomplish things and make things happen. However, the inspiration and the understanding and support and ideas and so much information and wisdom comes in the now, which is in the being. And a lot of time we get so caught up in the doing and trying to figure out how to get to A to B to C to D and E and F and G, and how we're going to be doing that, how long it's going to take us, how many years, months, what diplomas we need, and what this we need, and what, all these different things. We're in the doing. And yet, if we switch a majority of that into the being and allow ourselves to get information through meditation, through clearing up sort of the wound that's keeping us locked into the doing, it will free up a channel to allow us to have a different perspective on life and how to deal with things, and also ideas of how to get to that destination in a much different way.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit like when, I often go into the woods or just into the countryside, and it's then when I'm in that environment, that's when I often get the insight myself. So, and that is through me being in the moment, still buzzing around, but I'm more in my body, more in my heart, and then the information, the ideas can come in. And when it comes to the mind, that's just all the second-hand in information. As you've said, it's very much in the doing, and coming back to the early years. I mean, if there was a parent there who was always focused on the doing, and then there wasn't any, there wasn't the love and the support for that child just to be, then again, needing to be very doing orientated, lots of action. Because if the child didn't do anything, then the child's going to feel as though they're worthless. So that then becomes, as an adult, we can have no awareness of that, but then that just becomes our behavior. It becomes our character, who we are. Oh, lost me here. Oh, I'm back. I'm back in. And that just becomes another way of life. So as you're saying, it's very important through the meditation, very beneficial to get out of that head of ours and into the body and connect to our heart. Make use of that effortless guidance and wisdom.
Absolutely. And the self-sabotage aspect can come in, and even this, I mean, linking this into the inner child, that self-sabotaging element. For example, when we receive information at an early stage in our lives that if we don't do so-and-so thing, or if we don't do this and this, we're going to end up like this, or we're going to end up without this, or we're going to end up poor, we're going to end up penniless, or you're going to end up being uneducated and you won't be able to get a job. You know, these sort of fear tactics that parents can use sometimes. If you don't do that, you're not going to pass this, you're not going to pass this. And if these things, if this sort of negative talk is said too many times, a child is a sponge. It's just going to go straight in. It can create a structure in their mind that then acts as a wound that the child will keep going back to. So they'll keep going back where, or they'll manifest themselves into not achieving, because that negative talk, the talk has actually created the structure that makes the child believe they're going to amount to nothing. That they'll never going to amount to anything because they haven't done enough, or they haven't studied enough, or they're not enough. And they're not going to get a good job. They're not going to get a job with good money, or whatever it is that the negative talk was. So this sabotage can come in from the subconscious, where the subconscious has soaked in this information, created it as a structure within the person's being, and then it's so strong because it has a negative charge. Obviously, the child didn't feel good when the parents were saying that what they said to the child. So this creates a wound, this creates a charge. So that charge being quite alive in the person that's now grown up into an adult, it can still be calling the shots. The sabotage is, the element can be there, linked directly to that wound where they are feeling inadequate, or that they haven't done enough. So they're going to, that fear, that worry that they're going to get this awful job or not enough money, and they're going to be poor. And here they are living it out, creating because it got soaked in and structured as a belief and this emotional pattern. So this self-sabotage can come in from the subconscious, linked directly into the inner child.
And it's a bit like at that age there can be, if there's not an outer rebelling, then there can be the inner rebelling there, and then as time goes on, then become more identified with that, what we've been told, and then we get older. And even though when we're younger, we can have the need to go against that and say, that's not true. Part of us can believe. As we get older, not achieving that of being accepted. So we cannot go to that next level, as you're saying, with relationships or success, staying small and not going to that end goal. That pinnacle is then a way for us to unconsciously by the people who didn't accept us anyway. So that then becomes the secondary gain of where if I did achieve that, what would happen? And then the child within us can relate to being abandoned, ostracized, and obviously at that age to be rejected and abandoned is the end of the world, basically. So even though as an adult, we can see that we're okay and that we don't need really anyone's acceptance to survive. What is our behavior and our emotions and our mind can be a part of us that did need, the acceptance in order to survive.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. And we're going to open up the platform over to the audience as well to ask questions. We're very happy to answer questions related to the inner child, and please write them into in the section to the side. We've actually got a question in from Louise, and the question is, what 7 things do you think your inner child needs to hear you say? And I can put the floor over to Oliver, or I could start. Up to you. I'm very easy. Whoever wants.
Well, first off, 7 things is interesting. Why 7? 7 chakras there. Well, the other day I was speaking to a friend of mine that, if you could go back in time, what would you say to your inner child or the small part of you? And he said that he would say to this part of himself that everything would be okay. So I think I'm a big part of it. is saying that everything is going to be okay. And as for 7 things, I mean, I'm not quite sure that's a clear structure there, but I think in general, it's just about being supportive, loving. So just thinking about the kinds of things that when you were younger and the kind of things that you wish were said, and then what you could then do is to write out a number of sayings or words underneath the list to my inner child, and then just like affirmations, then you could say, I mean, there's one called the affirmations, which is just saying things, and there's what they call the proclamations, which means you say out loud, so you really feel the emotion and really get into the juice. Things with emotion and really get into them, that's when they usually have a bigger effect instead of just saying things to ourselves. So
thank you.
That would be my suggestion.
Thank you. So in answer to the question, I mean, it's very precise. What 7 things would you say to your inner child? My answer to this is, who is the I? Who is the I? Who is the person that is looking for 7 things to say to the inner child? The inner child has a wound. Now, the person attempting to heal the wound is looking at this from the perspective of there is a wound. So it's looking to heal the wound from the perspective of the wound. So it's looking for ways in order to rearrange or resolve the issue and the challenge. So I would answer this in a different way. Rather than find 7 things to say to the inner child, or the thing, or the 2 to 3 things that need to be said, I feel the most important at the top of the list is presence. And this requires no verbal expression at all. I feel that when you go inside to meet the inner child, when you're approaching that part of your timeline where an incident has happened, and you've gone through the timeline to find that particular point where something has happened, something's been said, or the child is in the room on their own and they're sobbing. In that moment, rather than go up and say, what is it that you need, or it's okay, I'm here, I'm going to love you, come and have a cuddle, all these things can be shrugged off and rejected by the child who's really distressed and in a wound, in a state of being distraught, frustrated, experiencing a trauma. I would say first and foremost, presence. And when I say presence, I don't mean a mental presence, the mind thinking there's something wrong with this child, so I'm just going to sit here, because that's still locking it in from a mental perspective that there's something wrong with the child. And I'm not going through the sort of like, the pity, or even even sort of the empathy is great here, but what we're going to be going into, I feel, a much stronger place is that presence with compassion. By being in that moment, being in that's like a power. It opens up a portal. It opens up a whole different vibration. That vibration where there is no judgment, there's no sort of, I'm coming in at it from a mind perspective. What do I need to say to this child to flip this around? By coming in at it from that perspective, it's almost locking it in that child is in a wound. So the energy of the person going in is already labeling the inner child as wounded, or in a place of sort of not being whole. And the child will feel that. We feel energy. You walk into a room, you can feel someone's energy. You know if someone's angry, if someone's in any sort of mood. The inner child is hypersensitive and is going to feel you approaching. Now, in that approach, I feel it'll be far more beneficial to approach the inner child from a place of real, true presence with compassion, because that could just expand right out. That expansion of compassion and presence can enable the child to automatically just really allow the the walls to come down, because trust is there, right? Because in that presence and in that compassion, it suddenly just ignites trust. It ignites everything's okay. You know, nothing's being said, but it's being felt there. You know, it's being felt. So I would say, rather than 7 questions and coming at it from a mental perspective, I would say go in, be present, and really with compassion, and see what unfolds. Become friends with uncertainty. Just allow yourself to not come at it from a linear ABCD perspective of how you're going to do this, but come at it from a place of compassion, to allow it to unfold in the way it needs to unfold, and to heal, or to for the child to realize itself, his or herself, in a different way. Sorry for a long-winded answer there, but I just felt that it's another way for a person to approach this. Yeah.
No, very well said, Errol. They're very, very, very different. Not seeing the part of us as being wounded and broken, and it's coming at it from a completely different, not angle, because that's in the mind there, but completely different space.
Very much so. Very much so. And it's one of the things that I really focus on. When I'm holding space, when I'm doing my sessions, or when I'm teaching, it's something that's very, very important. We have people holding themselves, or labeling themselves as healers, practitioners in certain things, and it's very different when you set up the space and you are helping someone or guiding someone that's come to you. Obviously they have something going on with them, and instead of looking at them as sort of, okay, there's something broken here that needs to be fixed, so they're coming to you with and saying, this is broken and I would like to fix it. And instead of you viewing that as there's something broken about them and it needs to be fixed, and instead set up the space that you're inviting a magnificent being in there, and focus on the fact that there's a magnificent being sitting in front of you, like a magnificent being sitting in front of you. One of the reasons this is important is because the person in front of you has just forgot that they're a magnificent being. This is what's happened. Some sort of structure has come in and separated them from the realization that they're a magnificent being for that instance, for that particular problem that they perceive that they're having, and then they're living it out through some sort of movie that they've created or manifested or co-created. So I feel it's really important to hold the space, and sort of knowing that they are this magnificent being, and by doing that, it starts off the space holding in a very, very different way, and it can lead to the coaching session or how you're helping someone in a completely different way. So yeah, I see we have another question that's just come through. So I hope we've answered that, Louise. Feel free to add some comments if you need us to go over that a little bit more. But we have another question through. Do you want to read that one out, Oliver?
Oh yeah. So hi, my question is, how would you manage if you had realized what happened to your inner child, and all the wounds, and feel like you spend so much time seed on things, and feel massive disappointment where your life is, and loneliness?
Yeah, this is the core of inner child work right there. The focus on fixing, this is going to go straight back into something that just went over. The focus on the fixing itself, just on its own, can be a very long, draining journey if the focus is on continuously attempting to fix something. Because the mind is attempting to fix something that the mind received information at some point as a child, stored it in files, labeled it in a certain way, and is now looking at life in that way. And so the lens the person is looking through is the thing that needs to be changed here. So another level of consciousness needs to be attained here. Another way of looking at yourself and your life is needing to be put in place here. So it is part of the going into the inner child and really addressing that wound. But as long as the mind is focused on the wound and keeping it in place, it's just going to keep repeating. It will just keep repeating, and it will just keep going round and round in circles. It needs to get out of the mind. It needs to go way into the heart center in order for something to change. In order for something to change, it has to come out of the mind and go into the heart center. The mind, from a disconnected point perspective, there's dualism. Something is bad, something is good, something was wrong, something was right, and it will just continue in that loop. The heart center, or the true sort of sacred heart center, there's no right or wrong. It just is, and there's a completely different energy in that just is energy. So my answer to this is that due to the wound, the lens has been created, and out of that lens there is massive disappointment and loneliness being seen. Something needs to happen. Another deeper level needs to be accessed in order for that to shift. What do you say, Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, you talking about the mind and the heart, and it just reminded me of when I was putting something together called A Dialogue with the Heart. And it's just, as you're saying, the heart is very different. The mind is kind of constructed a problem, and then it will continue to see more and more problems, and it will basically, it needs to see these problems to existence. Whereas the heart is just present. The heart just is, and it has a very different way of seeing everything. And then this is, as you're saying, all the time there is trying to fix the mind. It's just one problem, and then there's another. There has to be something coming from a deeper place, living. And this can take time. I find myself kind of going in and then kind of popping out. But what I know is that living in the heart space and living more in the body, then a lot of things disappear and turn. So I think definitely can relate to what you're saying there. It is about going to that deeper place and absolutely. Being in the heart, being in the body.
And it's going back to parts of what we shared with the previous question. It's about being totally present with compassion in the inner child realm, approaching your inner child with so much compassion, and just instead of the doing energy of attempting to fix something, like knowing what your wounds are and attempting to fix them from the perspective of thinking that you know what they are. Because if that's not working, then it's time to actually try something different. And so let me repeat that. If you believing that you know exactly what the wound is, and then going in to attempt to locate that and find that, and nothing's shifting, then there's a problem with how you're viewing your wound. There's a problem with how you're perceiving what you perceive the wound to be. What you perceive the wound to be could be a mere gateway to something much deeper. It could open up to something much deeper where you have a realization of yourself, your authentic self. Rather than attempt to fix something or resolve something or turn something around from a negative to a positive, use the wound that you perceive that you have as a gateway and be present with the gateway. What I mean is approach that wound and just gate to open, and then be present with what comes up. What comes up could be a flood of feelings. Be present with it, flow with it, become the feeling, go into the river of the feelings, let it take you. It's only going to take you through into your authentic truth, into your true self. This is the cave that we fear to enter. A lot of the times we stop at the gate and then we sort of come back again. So let the wound act as a gate. What we think the wound is, let's open it up, go in. What you may find is there's another layer and another layer underneath that, which can actually lead you to a much deeper realization of yourself and freedom. So I would say, just as Oliver has repeated as well, go deeper, away from the mind. Yep. And we have another question from Natalia. I love these questions coming in. I'm considering systematic family therapy to bring the energy of union and shared healing within the family in a way, as I see it, to reduce the perpetuation of those family wounds, especially for your brother who's struggling with addiction. Do you think the inner child work is possible in a shared family context if the opportunity arises? Yes, I believe. I mean, even in, let's say, family constellations, family constellation work is phenomenal. This is beautiful work, beautiful body of work where the energy comes in, really comes in, and suddenly random people that you may not even know, the energy of your sort of family blueprint, the layout of your family, suddenly just drops in to these people, and suddenly here's your brother, and here's your father, and here's your mother, and here's the grandmother, and then it's all just there, and it suddenly makes so much sense. And it's a beautiful feeling. It's incredible how it works. So I would say family constellation work is phenomenal. Bringing your family into therapy, if they are willing to sit in group therapy, and they're all very open and they can understand when wounds come up and feelings, and they're willing to understand that and work through that, maybe a great thing if that's possible. If all members of your family or members of your family that you're pointing out are willing, I would say this is an amazing thing. I would say, though, if there is a issue, perhaps say between you and a family member, the first thing I'd do is I'd work on the self. That needs to clear up first. The negative relationship going on between yourself and another relative, a sibling, or a parent, that needs to be cleared up first. That's the first thing, rather than the other person needing to clear something because you have an issue with it. In terms of your question in regards to your brother who's struggling with addiction, if he's open to getting to the bottom of that, then great. If he's open to you helping him, then great. But if it's you pushing him or urging him, you've got to understand this is also his journey, and it's up to him to decide, how he wants to resolve or deal with it, which can be frustrating because at the same point you want to reach out and help, and every now and again some people need a bit of a boost and a bit of a sort of a hand to lift them up. So it's one of those delicate ones, I would say. What would you say, Oliver?
Yeah, I would say a few things. I mean, when it comes to issues that we can have with our family members or anyone else, as you said, it's always a good idea to see what part we are playing in the dynamic, because without realizing it, we can be feeding in and kind of bridge into the next part about addiction. It's just when there's people we are close to or family members who have got problems, and we can see they're struggling, but they might not want to actually do anything about what's going on for them. They might just prefer to suffer in silence. So it's very hard. And unless, as you said, unless someone really wants to take that step, it can be a waste of time, and it can just, more of our energy can just be feeding in, and then we can just basically, if it goes on for too long, we put too much energy into it, then it can end up basically taking over our life and can end up basically feeding off of the extra energy. They might even like the attention. But family constellations, yeah, I've got a bit of experience of that myself. And I'd say it can be powerful. It's very interesting how people just seem to come in, and fascinating. Coming back to the need to be loyal, that's the big thing. Family constellations needing, and then that can be important when things don't shift. There can be a need to be loyal, and doing this additional work with constellation therapy can be a way to loosen those entanglements, as they say in family constellation therapy, and to allow us to move forward. But I think what I also work as well is that it's always important for us to do the emotional work too, because I think there's only so much in my experience. I remember some guy who wrote a book, can't remember who it was, and he was saying that the second, or it can be like an after, because it's unless the emotional side is not done first, and that
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would say that, with all of this, we've also got to understand that by shifting out of the mind space and going into the heart center and going into somewhere much, much deeper, we can find a new way of looking at things. We can find a new way of perceiving ourselves and the world around us. And in turn, this then shifts many things. It shifts our whole outlook on life. It shifts the way we view our wounds, and on a much deeper level, those wounds can turn into the very strengths that we thought that we didn't have. They turn into the gifts. So we have an additional post to follow on from Natalia's question. So the family is not open, but your own healing is shifting things around. But I need to really take out some responsibility and focus on my own process. Yes, you really do. So if they're not open, then you just need to do the stuff that you need to do on yourself. Allow them to be the mirror that is showing you aspects of yourself. Just allow each member of the family to be the mirror. So whatever you're feeling triggered about, so imagine all the members of your family are standing there, or the key members of your family are standing there, and each one of them is acting as a mirror, and they're pushing a button, and that button is a feeling within you, that sort of negative feeling. Sort of label that negative feeling, label that state that you perceive they put you in. That's the trigger, that's the wound. That's what they're showing up, or that's in this moment, they're showing up to show you this. And in each one of those mirrors is a gateway for you to journey into and realize a whole new aspect of yourself. So yeah, keep going with that. What do you say there, Oliver?
Yeah, well, I just thought, I remember reading a quote many, many years ago, and it said, if enlightened, go and spend a week with your parents. And I think this is the thing about...
Or a year.
Or a year. And I think this is the thing. Anyone like that is that they can bring up lots of stuff, and at times it can be intense, but it is a great way to bring everything up and deal with it. Because it's like if we move completely, cut all ties, let's say, with our parents or sisters or brothers,
yeah,
it's going to end up being mirrored back by someone else. So we can either see the direct connection through being around our family, or we can just believe that things are not things are disconnected, sorry, and things are just happening. But yeah, as Errol said, it's a great way to become aware of our own wounds and to be present with them and to resolve.
Absolutely. So first, we focus on ourselves. So this week's episode on conversations with your inner child, predominantly, the focus on this episode, was really, it's about going in, really going in and seeing that different way, the different way of looking at yourself and the wound. I just want to sort of emphasize, our mind is the wound, the perceived wounded self is the one that's coming up with what they think they need to heal, right? So in essence, the mind is saying this is wrong, and that can lead us to a door or a gateway. What happens beyond that is, I believe, where the real healing starts. The real transformations can really kick in. And we have another question here. Would you like to read that one out, Oliver?
Yeah. There we go, from Peter Carlin here. I'm often tempted to use quick techniques such as NLP, tapping, spiritual technology, RPT, etc. in order to feel better. There's always a quick shift, but sometime later the old feelings and thoughts come back. When I'm spending time being with the inner child instead, the shift is more slow and subtle, but maybe more permanent. What are your thoughts on these techniques versus being present with the inner child?
Would you like to answer, or do you?
Well, I was just thinking a lot of this. I think Peter might have on, but I think a lot of this, what he said, is taps back into what you were saying, Errol, about being with the child and not being in the mind, because the mind obviously sees a problem and it's going to go down in there into the cave and it's going to try and fix things and move furniture around, so to speak. But through being that part of ourselves, there's no trying to do anything. So as Peter has seen, it might be slower and it might not lead to that instant, feel good. But it is something that is actually going to last.
I really feel, I completely agree that, some of these techniques, they can be very fast, the sort of rearrangement of ways to think about things, clearing things, putting things in lists, breaking those down, collapsing things, tapping it out, and all these different things. They're amazing for releasing the thoughts. They're amazing for releasing the emotions. What does your inner child need? It needs presence. That's the whole issue. The inner child in that moment of when a program came in, deeply disconnected with itself, or through the actions of someone else, through the words of someone else. Presence is so strong and so powerful when it comes with that compassion. It brings a fullness. It brings a fullness into the being. So rather than attempt to clear up what your mind is thinking that it needs to clear up, and cleverly rearrange the thoughts and the feelings, which by all means will work. However, for how long, and for how deep, and how complete can you actually view and observe the human condition from a mental perspective, from a technique which is predominantly mental orientated? from the disconnected mind. Can the disconnected mind take into account the soul? The sacred heart center. Can it take into account those deeper areas? Because what it's seeing really is that something was wrong and something needs to be fixed. So I would say, go into it from a completely different place, from presence and compassion. Go into it from a soul perspective and from a heart center perspective. Really and truly, presence is what makes all the difference. And this ties into something. I just wanted to add something, and we're going to go just slightly over a minute or so, hopefully. I remember many years ago, like so many years, many moons ago, I remember when I had a healing practice room in the centre of London. So I used to get clients coming into a specific place, a room. They'd come on and do a healing session, have a healing session with me. And I remember I would sort of listen to what's happening. They give me an overview, and then I would I'd just ask them to close their eyes. I'd close my eyes as well, and I didn't know exactly what was happening at the time, but I was sort of like tuning in, and I just asked them to close their eyes as well. And what would happen, we would just be silent for maybe 10, 15 minutes. And I found that they'd suddenly go into this trance state. I was going into a trance state myself, like a light trance, but the clients would just go. They'd just be in a whole different realm. And I never knew why this was happening. And suddenly, when whatever was done, was needed to be done, was done, the clients used to just sort of come back and say, what happened there? And things were just moving in that way. And obviously, I understood it from a hypnotherapist point of view, because I trained up as a hypnotherapist, but there was no hypnotherapy happening here. There was no me saying, you're going to go down 10 steps, 9, 8, 7, and you're going to go down deeper. And there was none of that happening. It was just a case of really going into such a deep place within me that I guess just expanded out into the room. So suddenly this presence was in the room, and it allowed people just to drop in. Just that drop in just happened. And they were able to access something. And this was a beautiful thing, because that something that they accessed was a deeper wisdom within themselves. So rather than me input programs and beliefs and things that they needed in order to sort of shift from where they were to another realm, it was happening within them. So in answer, and I just want to go over that just very briefly once again, that the presence can open up a sacred space for someone to find their own answers, their own wisdom, which no one can ever take away from them. That's theirs for life. That's where the deep healing happens, where you're holding space for someone to realize who they are, rather than you help someone rearrange and rejig some thoughts and some things in place. So there you go. My 2 pence worth. Wonderful.
Yeah, wonderfully said.
So I hope this has been beneficial and not too complicated. And I really hope you benefited from this. We're going to be doing these weekly, offering this space up weekly, so that we can keep tapping into different areas of the inner child and different areas of people's questions and answering them. In the meantime, Oliver has books and articles on this subject that you can access. Is that right, Oliver?
Yeah. Plenty of books, plenty of articles, and an audio book coming soon. And I've checked it about 4 times. I'm now getting fed up with listening to it, but I'm kind of remembering things, and that will be out maybe next week if Audible accepts it straight away. So that'll be good. And I've actually got a course, How to Heal the Inner Child. It's going to be a short short book. I've been working on that diligently over the past week, so that'll be interesting. But yeah, there's plenty of content on my main site, transformationalwriting.co.uk. Plenty of articles,
Brilliant.
or hundreds and hundreds there. So plenty of information.
Wonderful.
Keep your mind busy.
I'm glad you've got all this information out there for people. And myself, I have free consultations that I'm offering people to get an understanding, a deeper understanding of what's going on for them. And also I have an online academy, which is launching this summer, which consists of 14 modules that add up together to create a diploma in spiritual counseling and intuitive coaching. So if you're interested in that, then errolcampbell.com, and just go to the academy page and you can see all the information there. It also includes a retreat in Bali with myself, because I do have a deep desire and need to meet the students that are signing up for this diploma, because essentially going to be going out there, spreading amazing vibes into the world, and really holding space for people. So I really want to meet everyone that's signing up, and we will move forward as a group together in the summer. So I'm really looking forward to that. So without further ado, hopefully we haven't gone over too much, but this has been a great one. And I really enjoy the questions that come in. Really enjoy them. So thank you all for attending, and thank you so much to Oliver.
Well, thank you again for having me on this call to be a part of this. And I'd just like to say, when it comes down to Errol's work, he leaves no stone unturned. So much depth and real meat in what he puts together. He doesn't just throw things together. Everything is finely tuned, so there's incredible value in what he puts together. Because through working with him recently, I can see how much effort and time he making things.
Thank you
really
very much,
come
Oliver.
Together.
Much appreciated. Your words are much appreciated. Thank you. So until the next time, we hope to see you all next week, and please tune in and share the link with your friends, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully the same time next week. Until then, take care.
Yeah, until then, take care. Good week, and
take care.
Talk to you later, Errol. Thank you very much.
Until next
Appreciate
time.
this.
Bye-bye.
And until next time, goodbye.